The Bible is full of stories of conquests and wars, of heroes and villains. These are the stories written in black, written in faith, written in fire.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at what is essentially the ultimate, universal template for the underdog story.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a narrative you've heard referenced 1,000 times over. In sports, in business, politics. We're talking, of course, about the battle of David versus Goliath.
Right. It's the foundational framework for anyone facing this massive, overwhelming obstacle. But the popular understanding of this encounter, a version most of us grew up with, it almost entirely misses the profound historical and, frankly, tactical realities of what actually happened in that valley.
Yeah, and the physiological realities, too. So we're doing a comprehensive exploration of 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is an event that takes place roughly around 225 BC, and we're going to dismantle that felt board children's story version of the narrative.
We really have to, yeah, to reveal a much more gritty historical and military reality.
Exactly. And to do that, we've pulled together a massive stack of sources for you. We're looking at biblical commentaries, historical and military analyses of ancient Near Eastern combat, and archaeological excavation reports from Tel Asafi.
Which is the site of ancient Gath.
Right. Plus, we have some really fascinating hypotheses from clinical endocrinology to look at.
And that diverse array of sources, it all converges on a single mission for our discussion today. We want to help you, the listener, understand exactly why David won.
Not just that he won, but how.
Right, how his victory was essentially a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. And we'll explore what this 3,000-year-old encounter reveals about the dynamic relationship between intense preparation and unwavering faith.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to travel back to 1025 BC to the Valley of Elah. You've got the armies of Israel on one ridge, the Philistines on the opposite ridge, and there's this steep ravine right between them.
They are locked in a terrifying standoff.
And the situation for Israel is looking incredibly grim, especially when you look at their leadership.
Yeah, the context of Israel's leadership is so crucial here. Israel is a brand new monarchy, and their first king, Saul, is completely paralyzed in his tent.
Hiding out.
Exactly. And what makes this so devastating is the whole reason Saul was chosen in the first place. The Israelites had specifically demanded a king to lead their armies and fight their battles, just like the surrounding nations had.
Right. They wanted a traditional military leader.
And Saul fit the bill perfectly because of his physical stature. The text notes he stood head and shoulders above everyone else in Israel. He looked the exact part of a military savior.
But when the ultimate military challenge actually presents itself, he's entirely incapacitated.
Because that challenge is Goliath.
And when you read the source material, the description of this guy is it's terrifying.
It's a portrait of the ultimate killing machine of the ancient world. The biblical text tells us Goliath is from the city of Gath, and the Masoretic text puts his height at over 9 feet tall.
Which is just staggering.
Now, some ancient manuscript traditions, like the Septuagint, which is the earliest Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, they put him a bit shorter, closer to 6 feet 9 inches.
Still massive for that era.
Oh, undeniably. Regardless of the exact measurement in feet and inches, he is a giant of exceptional, terrifying physical stature. He absolutely towers over everyone else on the field.
But the height is just the intimidation factor. His technology is what makes him seemingly invincible.
Right, the armor.
The Philistines possessed advanced Aegean and Mycenaean military tech. For context, this means they brought highly sophisticated metallurgy and armor designs from the Greek islands straight into the Levant. Goliath is completely decked out.
He's a walking tank.
He has a bronze helmet, bronze greaves on his legs, a bronze javelin slung on his back, and this massive iron-pointed spear. The text says the spear shaft was like a weaver's beam, and the iron point alone weighed 600 shekels.
Which is about 15 pounds.
Just for the spearhead.
Yeah, and his body armor is really the masterpiece of this whole arsenal. He wore a coat of bronze scale armor that weighed 5,000 shekels. That translates to roughly 125 pounds of bronze.
That's incredibly heavy.
It is. And scale armor was incredibly effective in the Iron Age. It consists of hundreds of overlapping bronze plates sewn onto a leather or heavy cloth backing. It's capable of deflecting direct sword cuts and entirely stopping arrows.
Wow.
When you add up the helmet, the greaves, the weapons, and the armor, Goliath is carrying over 70 kilograms of metal. He is essentially a walking fortress. And just to close the one remaining gap in his visual defenses, he has a dedicated shield bearer marching right in front of him, carrying a massive shield to block incoming projectiles.
So you have this heavily armored walking fortress stepping out into the valley floor. And he's out there yelling insults. But given the armor and the pomp, this doesn't feel like just some rogue bully acting out. It feels highly institutionalized.
It is entirely institutionalized. Goliath is invoking what military historians call champion combat, or monarchy. Right. This was a formal, binding military and diplomatic institution used all across the ancient Mediterranean. We see it detailed in Homer's Iliad. We see it used much later by Roman champions.
It was standard practice.
The logic was deeply practical. Instead of two armies slaughtering each other in a massive pitched battle, you resolve a war through a single duel between chosen representatives.
So the loser's army agrees to submit to the winner's army.
Exactly. It's a winner-take-all proxy fight.
And this goes on for 40 days.
Yeah.
Every morning, every evening, Goliath steps out and defies Israel. 40 is the biblical number of completeness, representing this complete, unbroken cycle of shame and terror.
The psychological toll must have been immense.
The Hebrew word used to describe the Israelite army's reaction literally translates to dismayed or shattered. And I want you, listening right now, to just imagine facing an opponent who is perfectly optimized for the exact game you're being forced to play.
They're physically overwhelming.
Right, wrapped in impenetrable armor and backed by an entire institutional framework that completely dictates the rules of engagement.
That psychological state is exactly what the Israelite camp is trapped in. They are looking at an unbeatable math problem. How do you defeat a giant enclosed in 125 pounds of overlapping bronze using conventional short swords and spears?
By the standard metrics of ancient infantry warfare, you simply cannot.
You can't.
Then David arrives. We all know the basic setup. The youngest son of Jesse comes to the front lines to drop off supplies for his older brothers, bread and cheese. But what is truly fascinating is how he reacts to the situation. He doesn't fall into the same psychological trap as the actual soldiers.
He doesn't at all. While Saul and his entire army see a military math problem they can't solve, David reframes the situation entirely. He completely bypasses the bronze, the iron, the sheer size of the man.
He diagnoses a theological problem, not a military one.
Precisely.
When he hears Goliath's challenge, his reaction is completely out of step with the rest of the camp. Quoting the scripture from 1 Samuel 17, David asked the men standing near him, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?"
Notice the shift in focus there. The army is mesmerized by Goliath's weaponry. David focuses entirely on the nature of the God of Israel. To David, the Philistines isn't just defying a collection of frightened men. He is defying the armies of the living God.
So to David, this is a theological outrage that demands an immediate response.
Right, not a tactical dilemma that justifies a retreat.
Well, Saul eventually hears about this kid asking questions and brings him in. And this leads to one of the most subtly humorous moments in the whole text. Saul tries to put his own royal armor on David.
It's very comical when you picture it.
You have Saul, literally the tallest guy in the country, hiding out in his tent, trying to dress a shepherd in his oversized royal armor. It's like a kid wearing his dad's suit to prom, but with life or death consequences. Saul is trying to solve the Goliath problem by replicating Goliath's approach.
It perfectly illustrates the natural human reflex to fight the enemy on the enemy's terms. Saul wants to turn David into a miniature, heavily armored Philistine, but David tries to walk in Saul's tunic, his armor, his bronze helmet, and he realizes it's a trap.
He says, "I cannot go in these because I'm not used to them."
And he takes them off. By removing that armor, David explicitly refuses to play Goliath's game.
Instead, he takes his staff, his shepherd's bag, and his sling. And we need to pause right here and address the elephant in the room regarding the sling. The modern, popular image of David as a helpless little kid walking into battle with a wooden toy slingshot is completely historically inaccurate.
It could not be further from the truth. David was a highly trained specialist. When he defends his capability to King Saul, he points directly to his real-world combat experience. He says, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine."
The life of a Judean shepherd was not just sitting peacefully in a meadow playing a harp.
Not at all. It involved navigating treacherous ravines and fending off apex predators. We're talking about the Syrian brown bear and local lions. David had pursued them, closed the distance, and killed them to protect his flock. He was battle-tested in a solitary, unforgiving environment.
And his primary weapon for that survival was the sling. Military history shows us the ancient sling was a devastating, specialized weapon. Armies employed elite units of them, like the famous Balearic slingers from the Mediterranean islands.
They're essentially the ancient world's premier artillery snipers.
Exactly. An expert slinger spinning a lead ovoid or a dense, smooth river stone could whip that projectile at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. A dense stone, slung by a professional, delivers the kinetic energy and stopping power equivalent to a bullet from a modern .45 caliber handgun.
This is lethal long-range artillery.
And David's preparation is meticulous. He goes down to the wadi, the dry riverbed, and selects 5 smooth stones.
This isn't just about finding something heavy. Smooth stones of uniform density, shaped by centuries of water flow, are aerodynamically predictable. They spin consistently in the air, maintain their trajectory, and deliver their kinetic energy efficiently upon impact.
He is carefully selecting high-grade, match-quality ammunition. And some commentators point out a brilliant historical detail regarding why he chose exactly 5 stones. In 2 Samuel chapter 21, the text mentions that Goliath had 4 giant brothers warriors who were later killed by David's men. Selecting 5 stones wasn't a sign of doubt or a lack of faith.
It was perfectly calculated preparation, just in case the entire family decided to rush the field once their champion went down.
I love that. So the stage is set, and David walks out to the valley floor. In the ancient world, champion combat always began with ritualistic trash talk. Goliath looks at this unarmored teenager carrying a shepherd's staff and is deeply insulted. He shouts, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?"
Goliath completely misreads the tactical situation. He sees the wooden staff, but he entirely misses the sling hidden in the shepherd's hand. And the text notes he curses David by his Philistine gods, invoking the divine backing that this specific type of champion combat required.
David's response is the theological hinge of the entire narrative. He shouts back, and I'm quoting directly from 1 Samuel 17, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel."
He lays out the overarching principle of the battle in the very next breath. He says, "It is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's." David is announcing to Goliath, to the Philistines, and to the terrified Israelites behind him that conventional military power and heavy bronze armor are completely irrelevant to what is about to happen.
Here's where it gets really interesting. There's a completely different lens to view this encounter through, and it comes from modern medical research. Writers like Malcolm Gladwell and clinical endocrinologists like John Huber have popularized a fascinating hypothesis about Goliath's physical condition that changes how we view his apparent invincibility.
The hypothesis asks a really compelling question. Could Goliath's massive size actually be the result of a severe medical disorder, specifically a condition caused by a pituitary adenoma?
A tumor.
Yes, a benign tumor on the pituitary gland at the base of the brain that causes a massive overproduction of growth hormone, resulting in a condition known as acromegaly or gigantism.
And the truly incredible part of this medical hypothesis is the specific side effect of that tumor. As the adenoma grows, it often compresses the optic chiasm.
Which is the part of the brain where the optic nerves cross.
Right, and this leads to a visual impairment called bitemporal hemianopia. In plain English, that means a severe restriction of peripheral vision.
An individual suffering from this condition has significant difficulty seeing anything approaching from the sides or from below their direct line of sight. They are essentially looking at the world through tunnel vision.
When you apply that medical lens to the text, so many details suddenly make perfect sense. It explains why Goliath moves so slowly and ploddingly down into the valley. It explains why he needed a shield bearer to guide him and act as his eyes.
It explains why he saw the staff but didn't register the sling.
And crucially, it explains why he couldn't visually track a fast-moving, unarmored teenager running at him from the periphery of the battlefield.
It is a stunning realization when you put the pieces together. Goliath's overwhelming physical advantage, his massive height and bulk, was likely accompanied by a severe, undiagnosed vulnerability. He was perfectly equipped for slow, heavy, close-quarters combat against another giant in heavy armor.
But he was uniquely, tragically vulnerable to a fast, agile, ranged attack from a smaller opponent.
Exactly.
So let's look at the physics of the strike itself. David doesn't stand still. The text says he runs quickly toward the battle line to meet the giant. He's building forward momentum, transferring that energy into the rotation of the sling, and rapidly closing the distance to neutralize the reach of Goliath's javelin and spear.
He releases the stone. Now, Goliath is covered in 125 pounds of bronze scale armor, greaves on his legs, and a massive helmet on his head. But a traditional ancient helmet leaves an exposed gap of skin on the forehead, right above the eyes, to allow for vision.
The only weak spot.
The stone, traveling with the kinetic energy of a modern bullet, sinks directly into that exposed frontal bone. The impact causes immediate, catastrophic, traumatic brain injury.
The text notes a very specific detail here. Goliath falls face down, not backward, not sideways, face down, which is completely consistent with a sudden neurological shutdown from a massive frontal impact. His legs simply give out beneath him.
And then David, who specifically refused to bring a sword to the fight, runs up, draws the giant's own massive iron sword from its sheath, and cuts off his head.
It is a profound symbolic completion to the duel. The champion who marched out to destroy Israel with advanced metallurgy and an iron sword is decapitated with his own blade. The weapon of the enemy is turned entirely against him.
And the moment the Philistine army sees their supposedly invincible champion dead on the valley floor, their morale shatters. They turn and flee, and the Israelite army surges forward in pursuit.
It's a total reversal of reality in a matter of seconds. And we should note, this isn't just a mythic fable floating outside of history. There is actual archaeological evidence grounding the reality of this warrior culture. At the Tel Esafi excavations, which is the site of ancient Gath where Goliath was from, archaeologist Aaron Mayer and his team made a remarkable discovery.
They unearthed a small pottery shard dating to around 950 BC. That is just a generation or two after the time of David.
The inscription on that shard is what makes it so valuable. It contains the names ALWT and WLT written in Proto-Philistine script.
This script shows a fascinating blend of local Canaanite and Asian cultural influences. But more importantly, those two names are linguistic cognates to the name Goliath. In other words, they share the exact same root sounds.
Now, this shard doesn't prove that this specific biblical Goliath existed, but it absolutely proves the cultural memory and the historical reality of this specific type of name and warrior class operating in that exact region during that exact era.
It grounds the narrative in historical dirt. But as we pull back and look at the whole story, the text is doing something highly intentional with the characters involved.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, 1 Samuel 17 is really a tale of two hearts.
It's a sustained, deliberate contrast between King Saul and David. Earlier in the biblical text, God had explicitly instructed the prophet Samuel not to look at outward appearance or physical height because God looks at the heart.
Saul had the impressive height, and he had the royal armor, but he completely lacked the heart. He lacked the faith to trust the God of Israel in a crisis.
David, on the other hand, is described as the man after God's own heart. He had no armor, no royal pedigree, and no height advantage, but his heart was entirely aligned with the reality of the living God.
That contrast defines the trajectory of both men. Saul's kingship was entirely based on looking the part of a conventional monarch. David's kingship, which truly begins its public trajectory in this valley, is based on a profound, actionable trust in the Lord's deliverance.
Oh, true.
So what does this all mean? What do you, as the listener, take away from a battle fought over 3,000 years ago? I think the first massive takeaway is that preparation and faith are not opposites.
That is a vital point to understand. David trusted God completely to deliver him, but he also spent years in the obscurity of the wilderness, painstakingly practicing his aim against lions and bears out of sheer necessity and survival.
He carefully went to the wadi and selected aerodynamically perfect ammunition.
He didn't just walk out onto the battlefield empty-handed expecting a magic trick. He brought his finely honed, real-world skills and offered them to God's purpose.
God chose the unexpected instrument. He used the exact unconventional skills David had quietly built in the wilderness to exploit the giant's hidden vulnerability. The very thing that made Goliath terrifying, his massive size, was the very thing that made him medically vulnerable to David's specific, highly mobile skill set.
There is also an even deeper layer here, particularly in how Christian theology views this narrative. For centuries, interpreters have seen this encounter in the Valley of Elah as a profound typological prefiguration of Christ.
That is a fascinating angle. Unpack that connection for us.
Consider the structural parallels. You have a shepherd who is sent by his father to the battle line. He is despised and dismissed by his older brothers and laughed at by the world's champions, yet he steps forward to fight the terrifying enemy of God's people as their single, solitary representative.
The ultimate champion combat.
Exactly. He defeats this enemy not through conventional military power, but through apparent weakness. And in the end, he uses the enemy's own weapon, in Goliath's case, the sword, in Christ's case, death itself against him to liberate the people. The single combat at Elah is seen as a historical, localized anticipation of the cosmic victory at Calvary.
The narrative just echoes across centuries, operating on so many levels at once. We've covered incredible ground today. We've moved from the heavy, terrifying 125 pounds of bronze-scale armor worn by Philistine champions into the deadly, bullet-like physics of the ancient Balearic-style sling.
We journeyed through a fascinating medical diagnosis of gigantism and restricted peripheral vision.
And arrived straight at the theological core of the story, relying on the living God rather than conventional weapons.
It changes how you view an underdog, because when the battle is the Lord's, the conventional metrics of power, height, heavy armor, institutional backing suddenly matter very little.
It's not about who has the heaviest spear. It's about who recognizes the living God on the battlefield and brings their honed skills to the fight.
This raises an important question for you to consider in your own life. We often view our biggest obstacles, our giants, as invincible, heavily armored, and entirely overwhelming. But what if the very thing that makes your giant so terrifying is also the source of its hidden vulnerability? And what if the unconventional skills you've been quietly developing in your own wilderness are exactly what's needed to bring it down?
That is a fantastic point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a whole new perspective on a historical encounter you thought you already knew. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
Join us for the next podcast episode in the Written in Fire series. You can also read about the destruction of Solomon's temple in the book Written in Fire, available on Amazon.